Take a look at this graph. It's a representation of cards sorted by how flexible they are in deck construction. Over here on the left we have the staples, cards that can go into a variety of decks regardless of strategy or synergy. This includes stuff like Beast Within, Rhystic Study, and Rampant Growth. These require practically no additional help to do their jobs. In the middle, we have archetypal cards. These might function on their own, but realistically want to see play within specific strategies. Cards like Hardened Scales and Mayhem Devil have a high amount of potential, but it can only really be reached in a more tailored environment. So what do we have over here then? On the far end, where the concept is taken to the extreme. These are cards with tons of potential, but only if you dedicate most of your deck to making them work. They can consume your deck building, and if you let them, they may single-handedly win you the game. I call these cards build-arounds, and today, I want to talk about some of my favorites. Let's set some ground rules first though. I'm not going to be talking about any commanders. Obviously, they urge you to build around them, but that's because of their place in your deck rather than their unique and powerful effect. I'm also not going to include anything that has language like, play as many of me as you want in a deck. Yeah, Relentless Rats takes over deck construction, but that's because you have 40 of them. And lastly, I'm not covering any dedicated alternate win conditions. They probably qualify, but they're so obvious that I don't really have any advice you wouldn't surmise just by reading the card. With that out of the way, let's get into this. Let's say you're the archetypal green player, the Timmy. The kid at heart who loves nothing more than to show everyone his dinosaur collection. But instead of outgrowing this, you've decided over time that it's the best way to play. Who cares about engines and instants? Your inner child was right. Big scary monsters are the most exciting, so why play anything but? This is where Primal Surge comes in. I know it says sorcery in the text box, but I promise, this is the key to making your stompy dreams come true. It tells you to exile the top card of your library, and if it's a permanent, just put it onto the battlefield for free. Then you keep going, until eventually you whiff. Because it just repeats, this thing has the potential to literally play your entire deck at once. If you hit a non-permanent though, it ends. So to maximize its impact, you'll have to make a deck entirely constructed of permanents. This is what makes it a build-around. Like we talked about before, it's a card with an incredibly high ceiling, but you have to dedicate a great deal of your card's deck decisions towards making it work. Otherwise, it has a cavernous floor. For anyone worried about milling yourself out, don't be. That whole effect is a may clause, so you can opt not to put the card onto the battlefield to stop the surge at any time. Here's my advice for building around this card. Making your removal and card draw into permanents will help keep the deck running smoothly in the event that you don't draw the Primal Surge. For the times that you do, you'll really want some haste enablers to make sure you can win the turn you cast it. You probably want to be assembling lethal damage the turn it resolves, because people will blow you out with a board wipe if you don't. If you lean into creatures as your permanents, cards like Rurik Thar and Nullstone Gargoyle will help keep people from interfering with your board. This thing is a powerhouse. I'd recommend building at least one deck around it if you're a Timmy who struggles with finishing games. I have a question for you. Do you like drawing cards? What about drawing multiple cards? What if I told you you could draw a lot of cards? Like a lot of cards. Maybe even every card in your deck. Now what if I told you you could do so for only 5 mana? Ad Nauseam. It's like Dark Confidant on steroids. You flip the top card of your library and draw it. Then you lose life equal to its mana value. You may repeat this process as many times as you'd like. So the obvious use here is to treat your life as a resource to draw a billion cards. But in a normal game, you'd be surprised how quickly you have to stop. Let's be generous and say we're playing Commander, so you have 40 life. Any lands you draw are free, but you can only draw a max of 39 mana's worth of other cards. This is probably going to be somewhere around 20. Even if you draw into life gain cards, they can't be played until you finish resolving the ad naus. So we end up with 2 ways of building around this thing: memory keeping and full commitment. The first requires you to look at your own mana curve. Let's say your highest mana spell in the deck is 6 mana. This is something you memorize, and when you cast your ad nauseam, you stop using it as soon as you get down to 6 or fewer life. As long as you follow this rule, you can never accidentally die to your own hubris. I'd consider this a partial build-around, since it encourages you to keep a low mana curve in order to maximize your draws, but doesn't completely impact your card choices. The full commitment ad nauseam deck will lean into low or no mana cost spells so that the entire mana count of the deck is less than 40. Then, if you cast a full health ad nauseam, you can simply draw your entire deck at once. This archetype is heavily supported by 0 mana rocks and rituals that will let you subsequently play all of the combo pieces you probably just drew into. But again, this requires you to construct your entire deck around the needs of ad nauseam, making this card a comfortable qualifier for build around. If you're thinking, wow, that sounds unbeatable, that's because it kind of is. Ad nauseam is the crux of a lot of cEDH decks, and is a well-established way to win the game out of nowhere. Just make sure your life total can support it. But that's enough talking about cards that play off the top of your deck. This time we're going for something that takes things right out of it. Birthing Pod, the modern all-star and eternal nemesis of Splinter Twin. This thing is great. For 3 mana, you get an artifact that lets you tap it, pay a mana, and sacrifice a creature to go grab one out of your deck that costs 1 more. Then you put it onto the battlefield for free. So this thing can actually just be slapped into some creature decks and see results. A repeatable tutor is nothing to look down your nose at. To reach peak potential though, Birthing Pod likes to be paired with enters and leaves the battlefield effects. Felidar Guardian is a great example. When it enters, you get to flicker the Birthing Pod, and when you do, it enters untapped again. Now we can sacrifice the Felidar Guardian immediately and go grab a 5 mana creature on the same turn. Anything that untaps, flickers, blinks, or otherwise resets your Birthing Pod is really valuable in this strategy. Felidar's sacrifice can go grab Karmic Guide, which revives the Felidar, giving you a reset to scrap Karmic Guide for Kiki Jiki. Then, with Kiki and Felidar together, you have a combo. Make a billion hasty Felidars and swing out for the win. This is just one example of how Birthing Pod closes out games, but it's a good showcase of how it plays. You're going to have some predetermined ladders to climb depending on how much mana you have and what the mana value of your creatures are. Also, comboing off isn't everything. You can absolutely play a fair Birthing Pod where the goal is just to get a big creature out early, like Zakama or Hullbreaker Horror. At the end of the day, Pod just rewards you for sacrificing the middle of your creature curve with early access to the high end of it. What that ends up paying off with is up to you. Alright, time for me to play favorites. Sunforger is a truly one-of-a-kind magic card. It's an equipment that costs a lot up front, 3 to cast and 3 to equip, but you can unattach it at instant speed for 1 red and 1 white. Here's what makes it good. When you do unequip it, you get to search your library for a 4 mana or cheaper instant that's red and or white and cast it for free. So for 2 mana, you get to hold up removal with Generous Gift, expand what you can search for with Enlightened Tutor, draw cards with Valakut Awakening, stop yourself from losing with Angel's Grace, get extra turns with Last Chance, and you see how this goes. On and on and on, you can find ways to cannibalize your library to feed the Sunforger. Once you return to your senses, you'll find yourself with a nice little toolbox of around 12 or so cards that exist just to give your hammer some flexibility. It also doesn't have any once per turn restrictions, so when I have a lot of mana, I'm a big fan of taking extra combats with Great Train Heist and then pumping up my kill potential with Akroma's Will to get multiple uses out of it. The hammer also has a reputation for being hard to kill, since it can fetch up a lot of protection. Cards like Deflecting Swat, Tybalt's Trickery, and Teferi's Protection can keep your hammer alive when people realize it's a threat. Sunforger seems to slot into Voltron decks, given that big power boost and ability to defend itself, but it also causes issues when you're cutting down on equipment to push for more instants. This makes Sunforger decks a clearly distinct archetype in my mind, since you really do need to build around it specifically for maximum effect. I think it's an uncontestable addition to this list. Alright, one more for the road. Doomsday. It's a 3 mana sorcery that asks you to grab 5 cards from your library and graveyard and order them however you want. Then, that little pile you made becomes your library. So this ends up doing 2 very important things for you, bringing your library count to a very small number of cards, and giving you perfect information and control over what those cards are. I can tell you all day that this wins the game, but I think it's easier to show you. Here's your pile. Ideas Unbound, Lotus Petal, Cavern of Souls, Street Wraith, and Thassa's Oracle. As long as you have 2 blue mana and haven't played a land yet, you're all set. Cast the Ideas Unbound to draw the next 3 cards, then use Street Wraith's ability to pay life and draw the final card. Play Lotus Petal and Cavern of Souls naming Merfolk, and then use them for the 2 blue you need for Thassa's Oracle. It'll win you the game when its Enter clause resolves, and as a bonus, the Oracle is uncounterable thanks to Cavern of Souls. This is just one example. Putting together a Doomsday pile is a rite of passage for this game, and I'd encourage you to try it for yourself sometime. The reason this is a build-around is the same reason it's powerful. You're choosing what the rest of your deck will look like after it resolves. If you want those 5 cards to look like a win, then you need at least 5 cards dedicated to the Doomsday strategy in your deck. That's a pretty sizable chunk, which means you're liable to draw some of them or have them get exiled, which can mess up the Doomsday plan. This means you probably also want a backup plan or two, and these can really cut into your card count. After dedicating all of these slots to Doomsday, you probably also want ways to find it, so a healthy tutor package is really helpful. Then, you also need ways to draw the first card in the pile, or crack it. Doomsday is a sorcery after all, and nobody in their right mind will ever let you untap after resolving it. So, between the pile itself, the backups, the tutors, and the critical mass of ways to crack the pile, Doomsday can easily become the point that the rest of the deck centers around. There are about 30,000 cards in Magic the Gathering, and the majority of them are pretty forgettable. Vanilla creatures and redundant copies of the same effect are important for the game's systems, but they're not exactly designs that swing for the fences. That's why I think it's important to point out the incredibly unique ones. It shows we appreciate when a card asks us, "What if you went all in on me?" Well, I think I will. Long live build-around Magic cards. If you've got a dedicated build-around card that you love, then please, share it with me in the comments. Reading them is my favorite part of every video I put out, and honestly, most of the examples you guys give blow mine out of the water. If you feel you got some value out of the video, I'd appreciate it if you liked it or shared it with a friend. It really helps the channel grow. If you enjoy the format of these videos, then subscribe to the channel to get a heads up when the next one comes out. I have a Discord where I get together with my subscribers and talk about Magic. Finally, I've got a Blue Sky. Follow me there for ranting about how bad the new TMNT set is. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.